Today, I think we're going to have an opportunity to dig a bit deeper, to dive into a really fascinating subject, impact investing in Africa. We're not going to be rushed. And since no presidents will be entering the room, you won't have to stand up for us, although you can if you want. So I'd like to start the discussion by just taking a couple of snapshots of what impact investing really means. And I'm going to ask both Eric and Maria just to explain to us how they invest and what they're investing in, and just give us a picture in a couple of minutes of what it means on the ground. So Eric, I'll start with Eric. Just explain to us what Green Tech Capital does and what impact investing is, the way that you pursue it.
Okay. So, hello everybody. So my name is Eric Young, and I would like first to thank you for having me here. Green Tech Capital is the premier investment company in Germany for African startup. We are very interested in companies that are addressing local problems. We believe that the change should come by people who knows about the ground and they understand what is needed. And this is also the source of our understanding of impact. They are able to drive changes, and our organization is providing them venture building. So we are the first entity who's doing venture building to give them an operational support. One, that venture building is successful and those companies are de-risk and have good basis to grow and increase their impact in different companies. We have an investment fund that will do follow-up investment in two tranches, 100 to $500,000, and then $500,000 to $5 million. For us, the impact investment is basically the positive changes that can occur at the level of the populations. We want to go beyond the statistic and see how it impacts lives, and that's what for us is important. We have in our portfolio a minimum of 75% of the companies that have to be impact-oriented, but we are above that criteria, but for us it's the minimum.
And who decides what impact investing is? How does it qualify as an impact investment as opposed to just an investment? Because from outside, I think a lot of people would say, well, almost any investment in an African country is going to be an impact investment.
Well, I think that first we use different experts to identify what impact investment is, but in our context, we'd like to connect the changes and the positive changes to the national interests of the countries and the populations. That's why we have an understanding of impact investment that can be sometimes more broader. We also believe that we want to make one step further because there was always this understanding that impact investment also means small returns because the greater goods has to take over the returns. But we believe that as of today, impact investment has to include better profit to make it more sustainable, and also give the possibility to the people that are initiating this impact investment project the capacity to become independent and also inspire others to follow that social good in terms of initiative and intention and the base of their business and included very early in their business model.
Okay. Maria, so you run the Family Foundation, the Open Value Foundation, which started in philanthropy and I think has moved into impact investment. Just explain why you made that move and where on the ground you're doing it and how you're doing it.
Yeah. Well, we start with philanthropy, and we've been doing that for more than 10 years, and we realized that the projects we were helping were always the same. Every year, same children, same moms, same hospitals. So we decided to change what we were doing. Something was wrong because the impact was not there. And then it was then when we discovered the microfinance environment and then the patient capital or impact investing, and we started to do it. The best definition I've ever heard about impact investing was from the former World Bank president, and he said, let's use the tools we have to make the rich people richer, to take poor people out of poverty. And that rings the bell on me, and I think that this is the way we have to do it. So impact investment is exactly this. Invest in people that have less opportunities and hope that they will do it same as we do. Another thing I realized through 20 years between philanthropy and impact investing is that talent is not related with postcode. So there is talent everywhere. And for me, at the very beginning, it was a big surprise because I used to be paternalistic with my beneficiaries, thinking I'm the one that knows what they should do. But with investments, it's different. It is really, at the very beginning, we were like protecting, and now we are working together like equals, like they say in the African Forum. So I think it's so good.
Okay, Christelle, actually, we'll take another snapshot of somebody. Now, you've come from a finance background, City of London, large-scale, sophisticated financial instruments. What made you decide to switch from that to Oceana Capital, small, targeted?
Yes. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for having me today. Pleasure to be here and to be part of this amazing event. I'm a product. I'm a diaspora myself, obviously born and raised in Belgium, with my parents originally from the DRC, been living now 20 years in London. As you rightly say, been in investment banking, very dry, competitive environment, and decided that this was not for me. I wanted to do a switch into Africa and wanted to use the skills that I've learned hardcore in those big banks and trying to apply them in this development finance in which I am. So Oceana Capital was born 2 years ago, 6 months after my own daughter, and decided that wanted to bring the skills that I've learned into this environment for the continent. The reason why, and I think we all can participate into that, was really to be the bridge. And I've been lucky enough to, live here in Europe and, around the world, was to be the bridge between European capital and African projects and products. In terms of impact investment, it can sometimes be a bit of a buzzword, and a lot of people think that just impact is doing good, but yes, but at the same time, it's a calculated way to participate into this development. So the investor that we are facing into this project is really to give them first a very strong commercial return, because they always perceived Africa as being highly risky. Well, I live in the UK, and I think with Brexit, we all understand that it's as risky as certain countries in Africa, to be totally frank. But to say the least, so high commercial return that we're providing to our investors, but also being able to calculate a social return. And when we say calculating a social return, is be able to report back to our investors what and how they've participated into those economy and into the project and product we've been presenting to them. So there's and I think we go into the details a little bit later into that, but we give, kind of a dual return to a client. And this is what impact investment for Oceana Capital is.
And just give us an example maybe of the sort of businesses that you're looking at to invest in. What are they doing?
Exactly.
Which industries are they in?
Yes, so at Oceana Capital, we are also taking the view with the Sustainable Development Goal, and I'm not sure if everyone knows in the room what they are, but they are goals that has been set up by the UN to really help and advance the economy. And there are 17 of them. I'm not going to enumerate all of them. But we at Untitled Capital, we are trying to really concentrate on the 2 goals that are dear to us. The first one is Sustainable Development Goal number 2, and that's equate with agriculture. So we are really much involved into agriculture, the full value chain. It can be from primary farming to agro-processing. And then the second pillar of Untitled Capital is the Sustainable Development Goal 5, which is the women economic empowerment. And we really are trying to marry both because we really strongly believe in women. Women, without women in Africa and in the world, really, it's a tough life. And we all know that. So women are very strong. Women is needed in business. Women sometimes don't have the voice, don't have the possibility to participate into economies, but we really should encourage them to be there. So those are the 2 pillars that we're looking. And to give you a very practical example, we have one of our portfolio company. It's a rice primary project based in the Côte d'Ivoire. And so primary business, for local consumption. We are supporting a local entrepreneur, and with the advice that we're giving them, we also are able to encourage him to really hire more women, but not only on the ground, but also in the company, in the structure, at the board level. And funny enough, he came to us a little bit less than a year ago for ask of $500,000. This was his idea, wanted to raise $500,000 to carry on and to progress into his endeavor. And with all the advice and making sure that we talk to the right individual, we were able to secure it's about to sign, but kind of a $4 million investment. So he came with a very small ask, and we've been able to extrapolate and see what can be done, and also knowing where the capital is, because, well, this is what we're there for.
Okay, great. And you said that you believe strongly in women entrepreneurs, and we happen to have one of them here. Vena, just tell us, you're the sort of entrepreneur that impact investors, I trust, are looking to invest in. Tell us what you are doing in Benin and what the idea of the business is and how it's impacting the local community.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I'm Ariela Wansou. I'm a medical doctor, basically, but not the kind of medical doctor taking care of the patient in hospitals. But I chose another adventure, but yet helping patients as well. So my story started 3 years ago when I was still in medical school. I was in the 6th year, and this day I was on duty when I received one of the patients coming from another hospital. So the lady just gave birth to a twins in these hospitals, but unfortunately she got on blood hemorrhage through the delivery. So she lost a lot of blood, and she needed to receive a blood transfer in an emergency because she was unconscious. And for a lady who just gave birth, the first exam that we can have on close should be the blood type, because the blood type is one of the first exams that we use to ask pregnant women. And for this lady who just gave birth, there was no way to access this information, even though she already had 3 babies in the past. So in this situation, she was supposed to have at least 1 blood type at disposal, but no way to access the information. So we had to waste the time to give her another blood type in order to go quickly into the blood transfer process. This process took us about 15 minutes. 15 minutes after that, we got the blood type, but this was too late, and this woman died. She died in a situation not because people were not there, people were not qualified to take care of her, but just because the information was not existent. And as this lady, a lot of patients die in the same situation because hospitals in most African countries are not connected. When the patient goes to the generalist, he goes to the specialist, there is no way to claim back the medical history. And that leads to a lot of waste of time for the doctor, a lot of waste of money. And that is why, instead of becoming just a doctor and taking care of the patient, I said myself, why not change this system and help to improve the process through where patients have the healthcare. And that is why we created 3 years ago Kia Medicals. And the objective is to interconnect hospitals on one platform in order to ensure that a patient going from one hospital to another can still have the same medical history, the same medical ID. So what we developed is a universal medical ID, which allows the patient to have his own medical record linked to a QR code that he can put on his phone, on his watch. The idea behind is to help him whenever he goes to have the same ID. And with this QR code, doctors connected to our platform can just scan the QR code and access very quickly the whole medical history. And the main challenges there that we are addressing is to allow patients to have less expenses in terms of healthcare services, because when the doctor is able to access very quickly the patient medical history, he can know exactly what's going wrong with this patient. He can take action very quickly, and that helps to reduce the healthcare services cost. And at the other hand, patient spending less time in hospital because doctor is able to give him a very quick care, can be more efficient at work. He can spend less time at hospitals, and at the end, in terms of expenses, in terms of expensive, he can have less expensive in terms of health. So that is what we are doing in Benin now. And at this moment, we started in Benin, but we had a very great return in terms of interest from the health workers, interest from patients. And other countries started to ask for this solution, especially in Ivory Coast, where we started to have some clients, some interest, in Gabon as well. But the main goal for us is to create a kind of digital health ecosystem that can help to reduce the barrier that are on the file, avoiding patients to access easily to healthcare services.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's a very, very affecting example of impact investment and what the impact that proper information and technology can have. It's life and death. We've got some questions coming in. They're good questions, and I'm going to come to them. But just before we do, I'm going to turn to Kim, a Dane living in Portugal, so a man with the ultimate European identity. Tell us about the EIB. That's a very large organization that does a lot of things. It's not the first organization you would think of when you think of impact investment and small-scale venture capital. Tell us what your role is and how you can make a difference.
Well, thank you very much, John, and I'd like to, of course, also thank the organizers for having me here, to Silvio Rodrigues and the Diáspora, the Portuguese Diaspora, but of course also to Jorge Portugal, who is here, and Cortec, for inviting me. Now, just very quick, because I have the deepest admiration for actually my fellow panelists, because they are in the forefront of impact financing and impact doing. We are financing, but indeed EIB is more than what we're generally known to be, which is a very big volume financier. I mean, we are the biggest multilateral development bank in the world and all that. But the real issue is that we also are very active in Africa. And I'd like to share with you 2 entry points how we do this. First of all, impact financing has always been in our DNA, if you like, but we didn't call it that for a long time, because we have engineers and economists in-house. So whatever project we've done in all those years, I've been 29 years in EIB and in European Investment Fund, it has always been with an objective to have it technically, economically, and financially viable. And now we are, of course, oriented towards SDGs and climate change and so forth. So we are even more looking at this. Now, in Africa, just one figure, first of all, 3.3 billion euro was what we financed last year. All of that is really about SDGs and climate change, and we measure the impact we do when we finance. So this is our lending activity, but I'd like to drill down even more to 2 particular areas where we really are very impact-oriented. And we do 2 things. Either we finance and invest in venture capital, this is one area, and the other area is where we actually ourselves take the risk. Where we ourselves take the risk and use our, if you like, standard products plus equity and venture debt is when we finance neglected diseases research. So you're, of course, very well aware that there's a big issue of neglected diseases, meaning the diseases that are more prone in Africa and where there's not often the financial background to actually conduct the research. To pull this through, pharmaceutical companies may not have the full incentive. And so EIB has, since now some years, dedicated almost 300 million euro to financing clinical trials and medical device development in the really risky stages, where we sometimes even take the risk on the next phase of the clinical trial in order to see whether it makes happen. We in fact have in-house also biochemistries and chemicals and others, so specialists who can try to apprehend and measure the risk we're taking. This is an area which has been very, very successful. We have had 140 requests for financing. We've done so far 10 for about 200 million euro. And this is an initiative which is continuing and which is also aiming to develop more clinical trial capacity in Africa. So where most of it still is happening in Europe for neglected diseases, we are hoping to also see it moving to Africa. A second area is specifically oriented to venture capital. The European Investment Fund is the biggest venture capital investor in Europe. About 30%, almost 1/3 of the European venture capital market is actually funded by the European Investment Fund, something that is often not known. And is all about building ecosystems, but also making returns while investing. In Africa, we have an initiative, amongst others, called Boost. We have about 760 million euro equity dedicated to Africa. And this Boost initiative is to fund the venture capital funds and to help build ecosystems in Africa. We see that there are Africa funds and Africa teams. We see African startups. And we see also African co-investors. And so under this initiative, we invest in funds, in new teams, in African teams, with a clear priority there. And we try to crowd in private co-investors as well. This means it's all about crowding in private money. As we all know, SDGs without crowding in private money and co-investment will not work. And our way to do it is beyond selecting the right teams, and we can talk more if you like about that, how to do it, is also that we have a special novelty, if you like, is we have a 1/3 first loss piece that we invest in particularly important impact-oriented funds, where we take the first third of the losses of that fund, and thereby we, of course, help a lot private investors that may be interested in joining this asset class and taking the risk. So I stop there because I think my co-panelists have much more to say.
We're excited.
But this is a very important product, I think. And it's all about building venture capital ecosystems, as we call it. It's something we're doing here in Portugal, but it's something we also are doing in Africa more widely, and trying to attract investors to the asset class, to try to build the right teams, and of course to support the startups ultimately. That's what it's about.
Okay, well, look, thank you. Those contributions are fascinating, and they raise a whole bunch of of issues. But we've got some good questions coming in, and I'm going to start with one that I'm going to throw to Eric. Should not impact investors be more equipped with operational know-how and ability to transfer knowledge than a regular investment company?
Oh, well.
And I know that operational know-how is something you've thought about quite a bit. So tell us how that works with you guys.
Yes, I think it's a very good question, because it's also giving the opportunity to follow up on what my colleague co-panelists mentioned. Actually, one of the biggest problems that we've seen is that the financial institution systems has rules and structures. And when you compare it with the environment in Africa, it doesn't really add up, because organizations like EIB and others will pull money into the system, but the system has limits that was actually designed for the European ecosystem. And when you look in Africa, like 80 to 90% of the company are small companies. Now startup is becoming a big hype, etc., a big name, but it's smaller companies who cannot absorb big ticket. And the problem is that the financial structure have been not made to address the operational risk, so they somehow exclude the companies that are in need of small ticket, but will represent actually the majority of the market. And this is actually a very big issue. So what we did is that we realized that the way to invest in those companies and try to change and have an impact on the continent was to develop an investment model that will, instead of excluding those 80%, will had investment in a form of an operational support, so that we can actually have a better control of the investment, because that's also the risk that your investors are willing to take or not, and the appetite risk. And I think that for companies, often people, they ask me, when you have a company in Africa, what is one of the biggest challenges? And I also tell them that, you don't need to look very complicated. Try to imagine that you're a company in Africa and you're just trying to develop a technology. You need a technological partner. The technological partner is in Europe and in the US. You can always try to call him. He will never pick up the phone. And those are operational challenges. So this knowledge transfer is actually key for those 80% of the ecosystem. And that's why we have organized a structure of venture builder, where we'll basically finance those venture builders to work within the company and operate with those companies at that level, so that we can basically integrate very quickly this operational support early. And because it's operation support and it's people, first you can actually apply it to many companies, so you have a better allocations in terms of support, and you also have a better understanding of the challenge and the risk. And we do that at the beginning, at the stage where basically the classic investment will not allow any operations. And by doing that, it allows us basically to combine this operational support with smaller financing, because you have grant, you have now a lot of grant, you have a lot of zero interest loan, but when you are an organization and you have to make a 50,000 zero interest loan or a small investment like this, the probability that you're going to have a return is close to zero if you're not involved in the operations. And that's why I think that it's, even from an impact point of view, because all those companies today, which are those 80%, if they don't have this support, they will disappear. And all the effort that have been done before with the incubator, accelerator, etc., will also vanish. And that's why I think that the operational support is key, because with this operational support, you can actually planify and structure the return or the value created through those small tickets at the level of the companies before they move to the next stage, they can have access to the investment. And that's what we have integrate into our investment model, and that somehow allow us to have a more rich pipeline that we can actually tap into that group of companies that are somehow put a little bit aside.
Okay, so that's a very interesting point. You're not just really investing money, you're investing expertise, and that's what's really creating some of the impact. Does anybody else have a thought on that, Maria?
Well, I think we are twin souls because we realized that this is true. So what we're using our foundation for is for this operational support that we call technical assistance. So we develop a blended finance model, same as you. So these technical assistance, early stage losses are covered by the foundation, and whenever the company is ready, it will come to the fund to be invested. So I think this is very important, and I think your role is also there. You're already doing it in the tranches for early stage losses to build the industry, because they are very, very like startup countries, let's say, where everything is difficult. So yeah, blended finance is the solution. Yeah.
We call that also blended finance. So that's a term that is, being widely used as well. So the blended finance approach will be, as my colleagues just mentioned, really integrating, the equity or the debt part of the business, depending on the receiving, on the investee, and then this could be supported by a mechanism that will really help operationally the company to be developed, and the technical assistance is really one of them. In terms of also the investment, we also use some kind of subordinated guarantee that can be also help in fund for investor also to find them attractive for them to invest, but really helping companies inside your portfolio companies to be operationally supported, that really help them to grow to the next stage and become more of a growth investment rather than just keep at the entrepreneur level.
Okay, great. And we will turn to another question again from a contributor in the audience, about the rule of law, and a very important issue for investors, I guess. If you invest, can you be sure that the contract will be upheld, that there is rule of law on the ground? And the question is, rule of law is a key ingredient in decision making. Can any of you shed some light on how you assess this criteria? Or do you take a subjective decision on the rule of law on the ground in different countries in deciding where to put your money? Anyone?
Well, I think that personally, I think that the biggest unknown ingredient in a company is actually the founder and the team, because of course we have different models, and what we've seen is that from country to countries, you often see the same problematic addressed with some differences, and it's usually the team and the people that will make the difference. I think that...
So it's more whether or not you can look the person in the eye and think this person's trustworthy than whether or not you might be able to pursue them with the police.
Well, we usually try to invest in founders who already have an expertise in the industry, because it's a journey of learning, and if the founder doesn't have this expertise, basically the investment will somehow be the learning process, and we try to reduce the learning curve. That's one. But I think that basically most investors are looking at four things. They're looking at the team, they're looking at the market, and obviously in Africa the market is there. They're looking at the technology, and that's a key element, because you have the technology and the cultural integration of the technology, and you have the executions. And the execution is basically what defines everything, and what we've seen often is that the first fundraising for companies will be based on assumptions, and the second one will be actually confirmation of something that is real. So I think that the first investment is easier. The second one is actually the most complicated, where you have to have those 4 points validated, and you have no more excuses because you already had, everything on the table.
I want to say something.
Maria.
Yeah, yes, I agree with you. But what is very important for us, because we're doing social impact, so it's what is the entrepreneur wanting to change? What is what moves him? And I think that's what makes a difference. I believe in the team. Venture capital is always the same. Entrepreneur and team, that's very important. Projects are people. But what I'm so excited about is that when we talk about social investments, there is something else, and it's that the entrepreneur, like you, wanted to really make a change that is transcending themselves. It's not just for the money or the scale or everything. They really want to change something that moves them a lot. So they treat their customers as in the middle of the project, because that's what they want to change. They want to change their lives or make them better, or even the environment, wherever they take as an objective. It is very deep into them. So I think that's very important. What is the theory of change they have to start a business? And that, yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to, there's a lot of interest in Vena's business, so I'm just going to pass on a couple of questions to her about it. One is, Vena, with patient history, can your platform predict and help prevent diseases? Second question, can you access data for patients based on their digital prints alone? Just tell us those two issues.
Okay. How to prevent disease with our platform. This is different step, because in order to make prevention, to predict disease, you need to have some data available, data that can be analyzed. But for the moment, the system is not there. We came from a background where everything were on paper. So the first foundation for us were to set up, as I said, a digital ecosystem for health, where hospitals, depending on the different locations, are all connected to the same platform. That allows the patient, when he goes to this hospital, he have his medical record updated on our platform. He go to another hospital, even though he's not in the same city, he have the same medical record which is updated. So by building this foundation, which is digital, our vision is to make some analysis with those data, yes, anonymous, those data which can help the patient and the doctor to have some prediction on prevention for the patient, and then be able to provide a very precise health and personalized health for each patient. Because one of the problems which constitute a barrier for access to health for some African people is the assumption that when I go to hospital, I will have a lot of money to, a lot of health expenses, because I went to this hospital, my health record stayed there. I went to the other hospital, my health record stayed there. And when I will go to the hospital, they will start everything again. But by unifying the health institution, the patient can know that he has the same record that can be used by health workers, and they can work on existing data about him. And that helps the patient to break some barrier about health expenses, and he can easily, when he has a small issue in terms of health, he can go to hospital and don't mind about what he will have as expenses. So for the moment, we are not handling the analysis part, but we are getting there, because having those data is a huge resource that can help to predict and improve the system so that we can make prevention about a lot of disease and then decrease critically the health expenses. And the other thing is that by having those accurate data collected directly from hospital, because with the manual process, there is a lot of fake statistics which are made from the hospital, because you need to collect the information from the paper and introduce it into the computer. It's a very annoying work for some health workers, and they just put data which are not that accurate. But with the system that we are setting up, we can automatically collect the statistics that can be used at the national level by the health of ministry to make some statistics in terms of epidemic, in terms of some disease. And that are the resources that can be used to make like strategic investments in terms of some orientation in health sector. Okay. And that help as well to better manage the resources and help more the population at the ground.
Okay, so you've got a digital identity that is transferable. I've got a couple of more questions for Vena, but I don't want to turn this into the Vena show, fascinating though it is. So I would encourage people to talk more to her afterwards. Meanwhile, we'll deal with a couple of broader issues. I've got a couple of questions actually with people saying, you know, I want to know more about what impact investment is and how you measure it as opposed to other forms of investment. In a way, a version of the question I asked at the beginning. One question here, how do you measure impact? What are the metrics? Another question, give examples of impact investments. Are they like care medicals, or are they more staple topics like agriculture, social education? So really two questions, you know, what sectors, what examples, and also how do you distinguish between what is impact and what is just an investment? Anyone? Mm-hmm.
Well, yes.
Difficult question.
Well, it's difficult and not at the same time. I mean, when we talk about investment in Africa in general, people say, well, by default, it is impact. But yes, there are ways that we can also measure it. We are facing impact investors, so not just commercial investors, but people that will rather have a social return and will forgo the commercial return. We do have foundation, not all of them, but some foundation or some social impact. They don't necessarily need a commercial return, but they need to see what the money has been, as opposed to just giving the money away. They want to see exactly how it has been done. So there are reports that company and funds. I'm working, for instance, at the moment with a private equity fund doing agriculture, and on a yearly basis, they do have social reporting on what the investment has performed. So the job creation, but not exclusively, because that's a very easy way to calculate, but also how the company has performed through, I would say, a technical assistance that came into play as well, how it has performed, how it has evolved as well operationally, but also, there's so many various. We are very focusing on agriculture, but I'm sure my colleagues in education, I think it's a very easy way to measure in access to finance also. So. When you have an agribusiness or a farmer that has, his farm in Africa, but don't really have access to finance, there is a way that, we can also help them to access resources to perform. There's, so many different ways in social housing,
Okay, great. I think Kim had a point.
Yeah, I think first of all, impact, and we have already heard it several times, and we fully agree, is about demonstrating that social impact investment is that you can have a lockstep. You can have both returns and impact. Now, impact is also about a change of mindset. What we see very much when we're discussing with social entrepreneurs, existing social entrepreneurs, for example, here in Portugal, we are actually also very much supporting social innovation and social entrepreneurship. And very often the social entrepreneurs, those that are in the social sector, are not able to actually quantify their impact themselves. So they are so busy just making their model run and looking for the funds for the next months, because often it's very short term, so that the whole mindset of actually thinking about what is actually the output. And this leads me to what I wanted to raise also was, social impact investment and financing is also about financing the output. So the focus is on what is actually the result and the social result. And as you probably know, there's a phenomenon now since some years which is called social impact bonds. Social impact bonds is where you do a financing and where, in fact, there's a new contract which is not input-based. Normally in social sector, it's all about input. How many euro per hour, how many hours, how many staff is thrown at a specific problem. But here we're talking more about what is the output. We have a new contract between the promoter of the social, so normally the state or insurance companies or others, who say, okay, you promise to deliver a certain output, a social output, and we will give you a premium, we'll give you a bonus if you reach that output. And so that is also about impact investment, social impact bonds, and actually paying for an output, because that generates new innovation if you start thinking more about output-based financing.
Okay. We've got two more questions which relate to each other, and in fact they relate to this question as well. They're about how impact investment coexists with other forms of investment and grant aid and so forth. One question is, how does impact investment conflict or work with the private VC industry? Does backing loss leaders deter private venture capital? Another question is, how does private impact investment operate next to government grants and aid? Do they coexist or cooperate? Anyone? Just VC, aid, different forms of money infusion? Eric?
I think that to answer that question, I just want to underline an anecdote. I spent one day recently with one impact investor, entrepreneur, and we were talking about impact, and I really see that there's different perspective. When we are here and we're talking about metrics, measure, etc., like was mentioned, for him, he was just saying that, okay, you're talking about every impact, but everything that you're talking about is my life. So for him, impact is actually his life. And what he was asking is saying that, okay, how can I make that my life continues and improves? And I think that the connections between the investor and the impact is that it's at that point where the entrepreneur will give the drive, the directions, the good basis, and then the investor, the private equity person will say, okay, what are the instrument and structure we're going to build so that you can continue your drive and keep that trajectory, and those metrics will be the point.
That individual or people like them, would they prefer to be given money as aid that they'd never have to repay, or did they prefer a relationship, an investment relationship?
Actually, it changed. Before, I think that before in Africa, you've seen a lot of people saying that they want to have giving money. But as of today, there is a new kind of entrepreneur, new kind of impact entrepreneur. There is more, when we talk about the diaspora, there's a lot of people coming back in Africa with a certain knowledge, etc. And now they want to own their own business. So they want to leverage on that first money to build a strong system, because it gives them some one step further, and then become really an investment of a process, because that's actually their independency. And that's seeing that in terms of impact, the biggest impact for an entrepreneur is actually to earn his independency financially.
Right.
Yeah. I think that what happened before is that they only know grants, so that's the way they develop their businesses. But whenever they become more and more interested, and they know there are other tools, they really want to use both and have you taking the risk together with them, not just giving the money and forget about it, but just a long-term relationship. Slowly, but it's happening. Yeah, I agree with you.
There's an interesting related question to this. Should civil society stakeholders, for example, NGOs and campaign organizations, try to create an impact investment environment among immigrants when it comes to remittances? So instead of thinking about remittances for aid and financial support, thinking about remittances as a form of investment, which I guess would build on something that Eric is saying. Kim?
Well, I mean, I think indeed we're seeing more and more foundations, philanthropics, NGOs, who in fact can use what I just mentioned before, which is this output-based financing. So you may not need to go all the way and become a venture capitalist, but you can go halfway and start contracting more the output that you're looking for and giving an upside for the output.
And also, I mean, I think it's compatible. I mean, like we start with a venture capital approach and we create foundations, because we also realize that it's also tools for them to make one step further. So I think that the target of collaboration should basically be discussed, and all the metrics for the non-profit and the profit can be aligned at some point if there is a good communication.
Yeah,
Okay.
we still need philanthropy, which is like now being questioned, because if the model was so wrong, let's do investments all around. So yeah, this blended finance, we call it a hybrid model, is badly needed. And foundations that are doing venture philanthropy are now realizing that donors want to do the investment, not the unrestricted funding, and this is causing problems. So we are all needed. Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting end note that, you know, for the individual, we have these categories in our mind about aid, VC, angel funding, but for the individual on the ground, they're often thinking about building their life and their business for their family, and those categories don't mean quite the same things. Well, look, thank you very much indeed. We've had an inspiring example of African entrepreneurship. We've had a lot of interesting questions about what investment really means, what it's doing on the ground, and I think we've seen that a lot is happening. So I'd like to thank our panel.
Sure.